Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Oleksandr and I'm happy to see everybody in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's day 505 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian occupiers, and now we will be talking about the power grid of Ukraine. Joining us in the studio is Oleksandr Kharchenko, director at the Energy Industry Research Center. Good afternoon, Mr. Oleksandr. Good afternoon. So let's start our conversation with the current condition. Let's talk about the repairs, not only repairs, but systemic renovation that the country was in need of after the massive strikes inflicted by the occupiers. So what is the condition? What is your evaluation of the condition of the power grid today? I would say the condition is currently difficult. There are two key aspects that we should be talking about. First of all, I'm talking about the reconstruction of the aerial lines. What can be repaired is being repaired, and the physical protection is being built now because there is certain anticipation, let's call it, so that the attacks may repeat in October and November, and there is an active work underway in that area. On the other hand, we may state that from the point of view of the high voltage equipment of the heavy type, that is the most difficult to be replaced and that is mostly needed now. By the heating season, we will be able to obtain about 20% of what is required, not because somebody works bad, but because the manufacturing process all around the world is going on in this way, and Ukraine loaded all the manufacturing capacities all around the world with its requirements, so there are certain restrictions to what can be done. But I think that the maximum of what can be done will be done, and at the same time the work is underway on reconstruction of the generating capacities. The power blocks are being suspended for repair by Energoatom, and the situation with coal generation is a little bit worse because some of the coal thermal power plants end up under constant shelling by the cannon artillery and MLRS, which did not assist its their normal operation. And on the other hand, those power plants are either owned by private owners or by the government-controlled company, which doesn't have a good corporate management structure, which sets some restriction on the operation of the sector, and it does not result on the quite efficient operation of the thermal power plants. Now we are in the peak of a summer consumption. The structure of the consumption has changed. Even the peak hours of consumption are different now. They start from 16 hours all the way until 21, 22. And the power grid, is walking on the edge, so we're able to cover the consumption, but it's difficult to do so. We have to resort to the emergency support from our European colleagues, so this coverage is not sustainable, let's put it this way. And the hotter it gets, I don't want to say warmer because it's real hot outside, and if this trend remains and we have the temperature of 32-35 degrees, it may happen in August quite probably. So there will be two options. The consumers will learn to switch off the air conditioners, at least from time to time, or sometimes the restrictions should be implemented. So what will be the options? We will resort to the restrictions. By restrictions you mean the temporary shutdowns. Yes, I don't want to be a Cassandra because it's impossible to forecast, it's impossible to predict the way the people will behave. I'm not talking about switching the air conditioners off, but preserve the comfortable temperature in the premises. For example, like 24, 25 degrees rather than 19, which results in less consumption of electricity. But based on the latest statistics that I've seen, there is no trend to reduction of consumption. The people consume the power carelessly, which may at certain moment result in some forced restrictions. But can we cover that growth of consumption at the expense of import? Well, it's a double-sided coin. First of all, the import is expensive, someone has to pay for it, but those peaks of consumption are being covered by the emergency support, but emergency support has its limits. So only by import, I don't want to be Cassandra again, but we may or may not make it depending on the way of consumption. So it's all in the hands of the Ukrainians themselves, including those Ukrainians who manage the business centers, the shopping malls, who have access to some regulation systems. So if a larger part of the medium and small sized businesses listen to it, there is a lot of air conditioners installed in Ukraine. If the temperature will be restricted to 23, 25 degrees, as I said, that would help. But Mr. Oleksandr, talking about the global renovation at the level of 20% that you mentioned, what are the threats during the winter period? Well, again, it depends on whether the attacks will resume or not. If they do resume, I'm not ready to predict what's going to happen. But if they do not, we will go through winter season normally and without any substantial emergencies. However, some regions are very vulnerable and there should be additional efforts focused there. However, I don't see such efforts on part of the government, or otherwise there will be more difficult conditions for power supply during winter period. So during this global reconstruction, do we use any additional protection measures for our power grid? Yes, there is very significant work underway. I know that many critical infrastructure facilities are covered with the air defense, and now the work is going on under the passive protection. The contractors currently work on installation of shelters for transformers and shelters for the electric technicians, because they were not present in a proper way in those facilities before. So this work is going on in a very intense way. So I hope that the most vulnerable points will be covered better than they used to be covered even in spring. So getting back to the terroristic act in Kakhovka HPP, to what extent it damaged our power grid, and is there a solution to those problems? Well, the detonation of Kakhovka Dam did not impact the power grid because it did not work since the moment of its capturing by Russians. So from the point of view of the power grid, the Kakhovka Dam was not some significant parameter. A big parameter is that the distribution networks are destroyed in Kherson region and people physically don't have electric power supply because the aerial lines are destroyed, the cables are destroyed, small distribution substations were destroyed, and it's a huge problem that we need to solve, but it's impossible to solve it because those places are under direct fire. And every week I see reports about the emergency teams that were going out on a repair mission, so our capabilities of repair are quite limited there. Talking about some significant consequences for the infrastructure is the electric power supply of big cities such as Kryvyi Rih or Nikopol, where physically the water is not sufficient there, but I think that the reconstruction is going on there, and I hope it would work someday. Well, about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, are there any changes of the situation? I cannot help but asking. Well, I don't see any reasons for panicking. I don't hear any shouts about some emergency situations. It's difficult to evaluate what's going on in the power plant itself because the access is restricted there, so it's difficult to say what's going on there. So before it's liberated, before it's demined, before we understand what's its real physical condition, we practically cannot get any significant information from there. Thank you very much, dear friends. Do we have any questions on the floor? Good afternoon, Yana Koloda, Ukrinform. My question is as follows. Are the power blocks commissioned that work on the gas? And if so, to what extent can they cover the deficit? Well, you know, all the power blocks of thermal power plants can work on gas. They can consume other gas or coal, but there is a focus on not spending the gas because it's a deficit, and comparing to coal, an expensive type of resource. So I hope that minimization of gas consumption is going on in real time now. But regarding the forecasted consumption, what's being modeled now, it says that we will need about 1 billion and a half cubic meters of gas to cover the energy needs during heating season, and I know that the work is underway on covering those needs. We have more questions on the floor.
Hello, Dr. Kharchenko, Lorenzo Cremonelli from Corriere della Sera Italia. Doctor, I didn't get at which point are we now with the production of energy? I remember the catastrophe last winter, and then in the spring, this miracle when the Ukrainians were able to rebuild partially the system. So miracle that at one point the story was that Ukraine was restarted to export energy. There was a moment when there was this announcement that Ukraine was selling energy abroad. That was in June or May. Can you tell us at the moment what is the status? I mean, how much of the system is working 20, 30, 40, 60, 70% comparing before the war?
For before war, you mean?
Yes.
If we compare before war and now, that it means that now we have near 45% of capacity in the system. But, you know, springtime it wasn't miracle, it was big flooding. It means our Ukr hydro energy can generate a lot of energy from hydro station. And this floating was higher for 10-year period, that it was really big influence from nature to ability of Ukrainian energy system to produce electricity. And thanks to this water, we really cover needs in springtime and early summer. But same time, we need to make a maintenance in nuclear reactors, maintenance in coal-fired generation, and this maintenance move us to situation when some energy blocks has to be switched off. And traditionally it's starting in June, and this schedule from June to September has to be covered, because if we don't cover the regular maintenance, we will have a problem in winter time, which is like at times more dangerous than to have some limitation in summertime. As well, when you're asking about export, in the middle of sunny day, we still have ability to do some small export. because of sun power produced by sun energy stations in Ukraine, but this ability is working only in the middle of sunny day. If you are moving to 7, 9 p.m., that you have not so much energy from sun energy station, it's of course create additional limitation. That, you know, it's a lot of factors which influence to our current capacity to produce electricity, and which influence to our current capacity to cover demand in Ukraine, and as well to export if we have something in profit.
Sorry, this is more a curiosity which come out from a story which we discovered just covering Nova Kakhovka disaster. Traveling from Kherson directly of Mykolaiv, not on the main road, but on a little road parallel. What was the name?
You've seen a lot of wind and sun station around, I know.
Now, wind and sun station, which, you know, when you don't see when you are on the main road, on the motor. Now, on the side, this is called Apostopol? No, Apostopol. Afanastivka.
Afanasievka, yeah.
There is this huge plant, huge, where the Russians stole 75% of the solar panel, 45,000 solar panels, more than 30,000 stolen, of them many broken because they were so primitive, they just, you know, they broke it. Now, can you, first of all, I have two questions. First, at the moment, how much of your energy is clean, is green, solar or wind power? And secondly, how much of these panels were stolen by the Russian in the occupied territories? Partially. I understood also now they're stealing in the area which are occupying because they're afraid that we'll lose it. So can you give us an idea of how much was stolen?
It's really a little bit complicated to be precise in detail in this case, but I will try to give you some pictures and figures. Before the war, Ukraine has near 7.6 gigawatts of sun generation and near 1.4, if I remember right, wind generation.
Which means in the proportion of the total production?
In total production, it's up to 8% of total production in Ukrainian energy system. I'm saying to you installed capacity, but you have to understand that sun station which able theoretically to produce 1 megawatt in real life produce 150 kilowatts, because not around the clock, because of clouds, because of many other factors. That you have to understand that if it's able to, if you have installed capacity, it's one figure, the real generation, it is another figure. That reviewable covered near 8-10% of Ukrainian energy mix. And when we are talking about stolen and destroyed, I can't split this to figure because, you know, sometimes it's hard to understand they stole something and then explode, or they just explode. Near 20% of renewable is damaged or destroyed, at minimum. I have a funny story with, I talked to one owner of wind farm, which is absolutely on the front line right now, and he said to me, I know for sure that one of my wind farm, you know, this, I forgot word in English, yeah, the Russian helicopter directly hit it in nighttime, and of course destroyed both helicopter and the thing in wind farm, and he was very happy. He said, I'm not regret, it's a good thing to do, let's do another one, I am okay with this. That it's a lot of different angles in this situation you can find.
Дякую вам за цей ефір. Мабуть, останнім питанням.
Thank you very much for this broadcast. Another question will be about the export. I would like to ask if we continue exporting electric power. Well, we continue to, but the situation is very complicated, and that export amounts are very real small. We don't have enough capacity for generation for normal export now. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this broadcast. Our team is preparing a schedule for tomorrow, so follow our announcements. Stay tuned. We want to thank our armed forces and glory to Ukraine.